He signed
All
up.
right.
Hello.
How are you guys today?
We're good. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right. So we know your time is short, Chad. So we want to get go ahead and get started. I'm going to continue to let people in the room here, but we will go ahead and start answering or allowing media here to answer questions. Give me just 1 second to look through the group here. Who would like to kick us off, please?
All right.
Do you have a question?
I'll kick it off if you want.
Yeah, thank you.
Chad, can you kind of go through how much time you've spent face-to-face with your team and your road crew, and what types of kind of precautions and everything you've taken going between, like, let's say this week going into Sunday?
Face to face, do you mean like personal interaction or via the computer?
Personal interaction.
Really none. I saw my team today for the first time, my pit crew, and I was in my car while they were doing pit stops, and that was it. So really, I haven't been at HMS. I went there 3 weeks ago to pick up something for my printer, and other than that, I haven't been there at all. So no face-to-face or contact with these guys whatsoever. Just everything's been on Teams meetings, and looking at them just like I'm looking at you now, Bob.
So you won't have touched the car at all until maybe you help push it through tech on Sunday.
I haven't seen the race car at all. Nope, haven't seen it, touched it, nothing.
Well, I'm surprised you're still breathing then.
I mean, that's the recommendation by NASCAR is for the traveling teams to stay, as isolated as they can to try to keep everybody at the racetrack as healthy as we can. And that's the protocol that we put into place, and that's what we've been abiding by.
All right, we'll take our next question from Jeff Gluck. Jeff, go ahead.
Chad, I mean, how do you guys go about strategizing for this race in terms of setup? And, do you just look at last year's Darlington race and try to do something off that? Do you assume that things have changed? Where do you go for a starting point there?
Well, Jeff, that's a great question. It's not easy, man. Yeah, we obviously used last year as a baseline. 2019 was a solid race for us at Darlington. We qualified on the pole. We raced really well. We lost some track position early, and we kind of ran around 7th most of the day until the end, and we were caught up in an accident. So we used that as a baseline. Obviously, the new Camaro is a new beast for us. So we had a really good race in Las Vegas. Our teammates had a really good run in Fontana. So we took the data from there, applied those offsets to the best of our ability and what we feel like the characteristics are going to be when we go to Darlington, and kind of came up with what it was. So the derivative of 2019 with a little bit of what we've learned so far in the mix.
Thanks.
All right, we'll take our next question from Zach Albert. Zach, go ahead.
Thanks, Amanda, and thanks, Chad. Just real quick, I realize you guys have had to really dial back on the amount of personnel you've had in the shop. Where have you guys had to kind of get maybe a little bit innovative or creative with some of the processes to get things ready for getting to the racetrack?
It's been a huge challenge, and I really have to throw a lot of thank yous and accolades to everybody at HMS, because it's not been an easy process to get back in there in a very, very short period of time and get race cars ready to go to a very unique venue. Darlington is quite a lot different than any other racetrack that we go to, obviously. But we've got staggered work hours. We've got blocks of people that we work. We're not really alternating days. We're going in blocks of days to try to keep the exposure down to a minimum. We're thermal testing people as they come into the facility. Everybody's wearing their masks and practicing social distancing. So we're doing all that we can to to be accordant with the CDC regulations and what the governor's put out there to make sure that we're doing what's right and being smart. It's not easy. As you know, we were chatting a little bit ago, I haven't seen the race cars. My car chief hasn't seen the race cars. My guys that are going to be at the racetrack, they're basically going to show up and say, okay, what do we got here? And get after it. So it's all unique, but it's actually been, I think, educational for the folks that are working at the shop to make sure that the cars show up at the racetrack with the best amount of detail that's capable of being put in our cars. So it's been good. It's unique for sure for everybody, but you know, it's what's necessary at this time.
Great, thanks.
What does that sign say behind your head?
It's a long story. Hotel. It was a stencil for parking, for painting parking spaces at an old hotel. I found it at an antique store a couple years ago.
I love it. It's great. That's super cool. I like that typewriter back there too. I've got about 4 of them.
Nice, awesome, cool. We'll have to talk after.
Yeah.
All right, next we're going to go to Kelly Crandall. Go ahead with your question.
Hey, Chad. So with no practice or qualifying, basically showing up and, you know, that old expression that's hardly true of run what you brung is now going to be the case. Can these races be an opportunity for teams to capitalize if they're able to, you know, unload with something really close, whereas other teams may struggle? Or will the races still be long enough that, you know, it's going to be same old rising to the top by the time that, you know, we get midway through these races and towards the end of them?
I think the potential for somebody to really hit on it and have an advantage is definitely there. Absolutely. Although, just like what you had mentioned, I think the best teams will still manage to work their way towards the front, either by the end of the race or by the end of this little jaunt that we've got going on. The best teams out there are going to learn from their experiences in the first couple races and be able to build upon that. And the best teams have a very good and deep notebook. I think if you go to any venue and you don't think that, you know, a Kyle Busch or a Chase Elliott or, you know, some of these guys are not going to run well, I think you're just kind of fooling yourself, right? So they've got depth, they've got time and tenure with their crew chiefs. So they've got a lot to fall back on. So I think the best teams will still be the best teams when it's all said and done.
All right, Dustin Long, you're up next.
Thank you. Chad, Hendrick Motorsports, each of the 4 teams are taking an engineer each this weekend. Some other organizations are leaving engineers at home to have the extra crew member there to potentially help with the car. Can you talk about and explain, I guess, the decision-making process for the organization, or at least for your team, to bring an engineer as opposed to having another mechanic to do hands on the car in some form or fashion?
Well, I think it's interesting, Dustin, because everybody, when you say an engineer, they're very well, for my instance, one of our engineers is very mechanically inclined, right? So he can cross over and do a multitude of things. It's not like he's just stuck in a computer, right? So I think every team is being adjusted per their strengths and what they feel their needs are. Some teams, their engineers, maybe all they do is look in a computer, right? And they have no value at the racetrack and they can do everything remotely. So it just depends on what your strengths are and what it is that you need. Me personally, I need my engineer. I'm not smart enough to go out there and do it by myself. I have to have somebody hold my hand, right? So that's why we've brought Brandon, and, you know, I've got Josh that's coming as well. So these guys are very good and very well-rounded, and that's why they're coming to the racetrack with me in case things come up. And I feel honestly that the preparation at the shop is what's going to really be the key. So we wanted to keep a good, strong staff of mechanics at the shop with good racetrack experience, recent racetrack experience, to try to make sure when we unload the race cars that they're absolutely race ready.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, Liz, did you have a question?
Oh, yes. Thanks, Amanda.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. And Chad, thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
NASCAR has, shared the fact that as part of their safety precautions, they're asking everyone who comes to the track to keep a log or keep a journal of their contacts, kind of their whereabouts, if needed for future tracing. So my question is, Can you share anything about the types of info you're having to keep a log of? And I'm also unclear whether, as crew chief, you simply have to do this for you, or if you have to do this for all 16.
That'd be very difficult for me to manage exactly whoever we came in contact with. And what we're trying to do everything we can to be in compliance with what NASCAR is asking for. And then we're just trying to manage, okay, we're going to be around this group of guys. And as long as you stay with that group of guys, you really know where you're going to be. We're not going to do a lot of cross-talking with other teams. We're not going to do a lot of cross-talking with other officials. So we're really just trying to keep that pared down to where it's easy to make that determination when it's all said and done. And I think that's what we really have to do. And that's the wisest way to go about it. So everybody's got responsibility in this, because the goal is for nobody to get sick and nobody to have a big problem, right? So we've got to do our best as an industry to make that happen, so we can get out there, we can keep racing and put on a great show for the fans, and we can get our fill for the competition that we're looking for. So we're all going to do everything we can in our power to make sure that we're doing what NASCAR needs and everybody needs around us.
Got it. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. And you're always so happy. I like it.
Thank you as well.
All right, our next question will come from Alex. Alex, go ahead.
Thank you again for taking the time. I'm kind of curious when it comes to the safety protocols, how much direction is coming from NASCAR versus Hendrick versus just kind of your own safety precautions that you're taking? I know some teams have had like mask grab bags and stuff like that. So I am kind of curious just what the breakdown has been like about where teams are getting directions and input from.
Well, there's a lot of information out there, as we all know, and we're all trying to sift through that, and we're using the best information we possibly can. Obviously, NASCAR is our sanctioning body. They've done an awful lot of work to lay the groundwork, so we're making sure that we're following what it is that they need to do, what they've recommended, and we're also doing everything we can to follow what the governor's wishes, the local governor's wishes, and the CDC. So we're taking all of that information, and we're providing the teams with all the equipment that they're going to need as far as the masks and whatnot. And we're going to go ahead and just try to stick with that as best we possibly can. It's not easy, Alex, and you know that. Everybody's throwing you different information from all of these angles. So we're trying to keep it consolidated to the local and state governments and NASCAR, and just honestly using our heads a little bit.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks.
All right, next question. Dustin? Did you have another question? Are you good?
I think he's muted.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Claire, go ahead.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Nope, lost you.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Let me ask you how you feel the responsibility of the crew chief is. It has always been said in fights and whatnot that you manage the team. If they do something wrong, you're in charge, you're responsible, you get fined. Talk about that as it relates to all your team members doing what they're required to do, including your driver, and then what is your biggest concern in general?
Are you talking about in the situation of the COVID and making sure everybody stays compliant there? Well, yeah, it's tough, Claire, because we are ultimately responsible and we sign our name on that line. It's a tough one. Jimmy Johnson always said, I signed my name on the wrong line. I picked the hard job. He picked the easy job, right? And it's a difficult thing, but we've been educating our guys consistently, providing them with the materials that they need, trying to give them proper direction, trying to give them clear direction, because there's kind of like what I was mentioning to Alex a moment ago, there's so much information out there that it can get cluttered and cloudy really, really quick. So we're trying to be, very, very specific about what the needs need to be, how they need to approach the weekend, putting forward protocols so that it's easy for them to follow. And look, if something happens and the guys make a mistake, look, it's a mistake. And if they're held accountable for it, look, I get it. Now, if one of the guys goes and he just is out of line and just going off the rails and not doing what we feel he should be, then that's a personal problem that, you know, we're gonna handle ourselves. But ultimately, yeah, I guess it all falls on me, and I'll deal with it.
All right, our next question, Jordan, go ahead.
Hey, Chad. Question for you. Talking to some teams and everything, it sounds like some teams are going to have a contingency plan where they may have crew members in the vicinity or even some backup driver just in case they need to rely on them. I'm curious if Hendrick has a plan like that where you have crew members, you know, are going to be close to the track on Saturday or on Sunday and Wednesday just in case something happens.
Yeah, we're doing a good job, I feel, of that. We've got a complete track protocol group, track activation group that we've worked with, and I was a huge part of that. We've got some very responsible people that are working on that, and we've got a complete list of team members that we're going to have that are prepared to go to the racetrack, that we're keeping dibs on and understanding where they're at from a health standpoint. And they're in the backup roster that's been submitted to NASCAR already. We're going through and have them on the ready. You know, so for instance, let's say Joe Mechanic gets up on Sunday morning and he's getting ready to drive to Darlington, and he wakes up and he's got a fever. He calls me, and I'm like, okay, Joe, you stay home, and we're going to call Bob and bring Bob in. And, you know, we call the proper people at NASCAR. This person's already been cleared, been tested, and we're ready to rock and roll with this fella. So that's how we're doing it. And it's, you know, look, I hope that we don't have to deal with that, but we like to be prepared nonetheless in the case of an emergency. We got that with everything from drivers all the way down to crew chiefs.
Thanks.
Amanda, you're muted.
She's never muted.
Oh no. Greg, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You're up next.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think Amanda's ever muted. Chad, the first race, the first Darlington race Sunday, is it going to mirror the second, you think? Are you going to be taking a lot of notes and searching for improvement for that midweek race, regardless of how you're doing? So in other words, if you go in there and, man, we missed the setup and we're running, top 20 or whatever, we're going to throw something else at it. Or, if you do well, are you going to guard the car and nobody goes near it? So is it going to be that much different that Wednesday night as opposed to Sunday afternoon? And do you guys have branded face masks?
Nice just to throw that one in there at the end. No, we do not have branded face masks, but we do have some really nice face masks that we think are going to keep our guys really safe. Hendrick Motorsports has done an amazing job of really trying to be prepared at all levels from, once again, for the guys and the teams from a safety standpoint, and what we've been trying to do, getting the cars prepared. And again, what we're doing with the race cars as far as understanding what we need for a setup. And I think you bring up a great point. What happens if you go and you run well, X, and what happens if you go and you don't run well, Y, right? And we've got a couple of options right now on what we would do, us personally, with the 24 car. If we go to the racetrack, things don't go the way that we want them to, we've got a whole nother package that we're ready to put in our next race car to take to the racetrack. If we go and it runs well, and it just needs a little bit of massaging, then we just go ahead and we just take that race car. It's got the right setup in it, and we just adjust on it just a little bit. Going from the 400 to the 300, I don't know that it's going to be significantly different because of the greenness of the racetrack that we're going to have. It's going to rubber up fairly quickly. I understand that, but it's still going to be fairly green. By the time we get there and we race later in the evening, the track's going to be a little bit cooler. The grip level will come back up a little bit. So we're just going to have to wait and see. There's going to be a couple more races and all of that when we get there. But inherently, the track does lose a little bit of grip. If you do get into the evening hours, it's going to get a little bit more moist and dewy out there, and the track gets a little bit slicker. So we'll just have to kind of watch and see what happens. But I do think if you see a car go out there and run really well on Sunday, my dime would be on he's probably going to come back and run pretty well again on Wednesday.
Thank you, Chad. Have fun this weekend, sir.
Thank you.
Chad, we know you have a tight schedule, so thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. And to everyone we didn't get to, apologies for that, but also know we do have a recording of this. We'll be putting it on NASCARmedia.com if you need to reference any of the answers. Thanks so much. Good luck.
Thanks, Amanda.
Amanda, real quick, I just want to say thanks to everybody. We really appreciate what everybody's doing out there. You guys are the ones that are delivering this story to our fans. And I know it's awkward and it's clunky and it's not a lot of fun right now. But let's make the best of it and put on a good show so our fans have a great experience and we can continue to push this thing through. So thank you all for all that you do.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Chad. We appreciate it.
Bye.